Before we introduce Craig, I got contacted by him about 3 or 4 years ago. As most of you know, I have a website, pdxhistory.com, and I've tried to cover some of the history of Portland's radio and TV stations. And as you know, it's very difficult to get the correct version on a lot of those things. And you know, you get newspaper accounts that you think they're accurate, and then somebody says, no, that's not the right way it happened. But anyway, Craig contacted me and said that I had some information that was incomplete or out of date as far as the chronological history of Portland's radio history. And so out of that, he and I have a pretty good relationship, emailing questions and things back and forth. I get a lot of questions, and Craig's my go-to guy as far as he's done a lot of research and spent hours, countless hours, going through newspapers on microfilm and any other way that I'm sure that you've found them. But anyway, we're really happy to have him with us today. And he represents pdxradio.com,
well,
so I'll let him maybe explain more of that. But he has contributed to the PDX Radio website with many articles of history on Portland. So I'll let you expand on that. Thank you, Craig.
Okay, thank you.
Craig, I was just doing a check one, check two, audio check back here.
Yes.
And you're going to have to project
Right.
a little bit.
Absolutely, I'm used to it. I've done speech. I think, can everybody hear me?
To do it.
Yeah, okay.
And Craig has been in radio for over 30 years.
Well, no, 29. Don't stretch it. Yeah. Currently out of the business, like a lot of us are. But anyway, yes, I was 18 years at KISN FM, and most recently at KISN. And yeah. That's where you're. And did a lot of overnight radio and stuff like that. And so this is once again a little bit out of my character because I'm such a night guy. But and this is my first time I've actually done anything like this. So bear with me. I'm used to answering questions. That's no problem. But usually I can go to run to my files and get answers, and I answer people's questions on the website pdxradio.com. If you've never been there, check it out. It's a wonderful place to find out what's going on today as well as yesterday. I kind of cover both territories, and there's a separate section for histories and stuff. And I've been posting stuff for the last 10 years or so. So anyway, I was told that you wanted to hear about Portland radio or Oregon radio, but that's a lot of territory. I've got a lot of stuff here, probably stuff you would like to know about, but I know a lot of you might have questions, so I want to open it up first with any questions on any particular you've always wondered about, and there's not a such thing as a stupid question, because a lot of this stuff is very interesting for other people that they might maybe not even know about. So I'm just going to open it right up. Okay, there you go.
Old buddy of mine's uncle took the transmitter many years ago out of KGW and put it in Benson High School.
Okay, what year was that?
I don't remember.
Because
I don't remember. I was told that a couple of years ago, about 50 years ago. 55.
A couple of years ago, 50 years ago. Okay. Actually, the way KBPS began, and it began as KFIF, it was originally the radio station was in Stubbs Electric Company.
Yes.
And that station was KQY, I believe. Or no, KQY was Stubbs' station. It was KYG. and it was owned by another person. I can't remember, but once again, I'd run to my file to get the information. And he only ran it for like a few months back in 1922. He sold it to Stubbs, and then Stubbs put it in the story goes, Stubbs put it in his front window. Some of the kids saw it and said, "Hey, let's go get a radio station together at Benson Polytechnic School." And that's how KBPS was born. And it went on the air May 3rd, 1923, officially, though that date has been always not known because they say on their website they began in March at some point, but that's when that's when it was licensed. And that's different because just because you have a license doesn't mean that's the day you went on the air. And so that's why going into microfilm tells you when these stations went on the air because it's right there. And there was nothing on March, though on that date that they say there was a little station in Hillsborough that went on the air, KFFO, which was only on for like about a year. So, okay. Anyway, yes?
Yes. I was wondering, what in your opinion was the first radio station in Portland? The reason I asked is that Kramer in his book, he said KGW was the first.
First commercial.
Yeah, and he keeps thinking that Charlie Austin was non-professional and the experimental stations were non-professional stations were broadcasters. What's your opinion on it? Were they the first?
I always said that Charles Austin was the father of Oregon radio.
And we, by the way, have a copy of his original license.
Oh, do you?
I gave to Mark.
Yeah, Charles Austin. Yeah, it was a great man. I mean, he did a lot of the very first, and I've got a whole bunch of information on him. Yes.
I have the original license, KGN.
Oh, yes.
And I have the original. Some years ago, when Charlie passed away,
yes,
his daughter called a friend of mine who was Charlie's boss at Portland Communications.
Uh-huh.
And Art Cameron is the gentleman's name. He called me and said, "Dick, go over." And when I got there, she said, "Well, go in the back room. You can't have the train, but anything else is fair game." And in an old Popular Mechanics were all of his licenses. There are about 8 of them.
Yeah.
Folded up in this Popular Mechanics.
And you took the KGN license, which was his first commercial license.
I have them all.
Do you have them all? Do you have 7XF?
Yes.
Do you have 7ZI?
I have them all.
God, because that is incredible. Because 7ZI and I've got it here. In fact, it's on my first page here. 7ZI went on the air. He used 7ZI in March 1921, and he was the very first person to actually broadcast his voice, and he was heard, evidently, reported in the, I believe it was the Oregonian, he was heard in Los Angeles. And he was using just the regular old telegraph in the very beginning, and he was the first disc jockey in Oregon. He was the first newscaster. I mean, he did it all. And he broadcast the very first commercial in Oregon radio. I mean, he sold his station, advertising back in 1921. So but I can go into that. Yes.
I assume the FCC was in charge of granting call letters and licenses, whatever. Did they also put out formats that is regulating what the radio stations were supposed to put out? That's news or things like that.
That kind of goes into the Canadian government. The Canadian government does that a little bit more with the CFRC. The FCC, you could basically do what you wanted to do. It was frowned upon to sell the station advertising in the very beginning, because people looked upon radio as the public airwaves, and it was owned by the people, and therefore commercials to sell, that's terrible. But then that's what basically really held back Canadian radio, because they went for a long time not going into commercial broadcasting. The United States did, and that's how it was created. Yes?
In the early days of Portland radio, did they time slice the licenses for the frequencies? I mean, as opposed to having multiple frequencies?
Originally, they went on the air on 360 meters,
Yes.
and everybody broadcast on that frequency, and so they divided. They had a what was the name of the? See, now I run to my file. It was a kind of a group of people that decided what hour of the mostly night what you would broadcast, and so everybody was sliced up on this one frequency. You've had your hand up. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, in Portland, when you hosted the radio stations and stuff, what was your most favorite group that came through?
Group in music
Yes.
that came through.
Yeah, the Portland area at concerts here.
Oh gosh. There's so many. When I was at KISN FM, we brought a lot of groups, some of the older groups to Portland. Tommy James and the Shot. Tommy James was an incredible person because he was just so dang nice. Then there were some that weren't very nice. Felix Cavalieri was one of the people, the lead singer for the Rascals. Yes.
About 15 years ago, I think you were on this.
Yes.
You did a nostalgia show, brought back Tom Murphy and.
Right.
Do you have an air check of that?
There is some. Yeah. I've got well, it's actually on a couple of tapes, but it's been available for a while. But yeah, it's. I wasn't actually. We did that in I think '98. And there was actually, in '87, when we went from AM to a simulcast of the FM on 97.1, they also brought back the DJs and did things, but that they actually did the shows, and that was when we first started. Yeah, no, and I missed most of it because I was doing the overnights and couldn't stay up during the day to hear the other people. So yeah, but yeah, okay. Okay, yes.
When did they have their first remote broadcast or sports broadcast in Oregon?
Boy, that is a good question. The very first remote transmitter, where is it here? Where did I go in? It's 26, is it? There it is. KQP. First station in Oregon to broadcast by remote control was KQP on November 9th, 1925. Now that's when they went on the air. At KQP, and they went on the air on. Oh boy, I lost it here. The transmitter was at Sylvan, and not at the site now. Now KQP became KOIN. In just like a few, they had some problems. They went off the air. It's kind of a long, drawn-out story. But the original owner bought it back, and then they turned it off, and then they brought it back as KOIN in 1926. But originally, the transmitter was at Sylvan, and their studio was at the Portland Hotel, and I believe they were the only station in the Pacific Northwest to have that setup. I think KGO in Oakland was the only other one that had a similar setup, and that was the beginning of doing things remote, because everything was all self-contained. Your transmitter was right next to your microphone almost.
Did they use phone lines to?
Yeah.
I understand that was quite a problem in those days.
Yeah, it was, especially the long-distance ones. In fact, the first, let's see, where is it? I've got it here. I just found this too. I'm constantly finding new information. It's just an ever-growing process. Let's see, okay, it's right here. Oregon's first station to participate in a radio station chain broadcast, that's what they used to call the networks, were chains back then, was on May 9th, 1926. KGW was linked via leased postal telegraph lines to KFOA in Seattle. This would later become known as the Northwest Triangle, they called it, and that's when HQ was added, so it kind of looked like a triangle on a map. And that was the very beginning of network radio in the Northwest, and then a year later, NBC came.
KHQ being in Spokane?
Spokane, right. Originally, KHQ was in Seattle when it was originally, but that's maybe you thought maybe that was why you brought that up. Yeah, a lot of the radio stations, call letters, and stations changed locations. It was no big deal. They were little tiny little stations. They could do that. Yes.
Well, of course, KGO started in Altadena and
Right.
then went to Oakland.
Okay, right. And actually, it was in the very first KGO call letters were actually in Underwood, Washington,
Oh, really?
as a telegraph station.
What can you tell us about the XL network? KXL,
Yes.
KXLY, KXLJ, and so on.
Right. That, and I can't remember their names. They bought this group of two people bought it from the original owner, Harry. God dang. See, this is why I go to my files. But anyway, they bought it in 1938, the radio station, and KXL was in a lot of trouble at the time. Not so much at the end, but in 1929, they got in trouble with the FRC, which was brand new at the time. And what happened was Harry was broadcasting with higher power than he was supposed to be, and how he was doing it, he was sneaky. He was kind of sneaky doing it because the FRC would come and do an inspection, and they'd look at the transmitter and they'd think, well, this is impossible. This transmitter cannot put out this amount of power like people have been reporting. But what he did was he had an auxiliary transmitter, and that's what he switched to at night. And he was putting out. They believed it was the full power and possibly 20,000 watts or whatever. They were interfering with KFOX in Long Beach, California, I think, but KEX did the same thing. KEX was doing this in 27. They got in trouble, and they were knocked down in power because of it. They went on the air with 5,000 watts on 670 in 1926, December 25th, Christmas Day. They were knocked down because they were, I think, broadcasting with 20,000 watts and interfering with Chicago. Yeah. And it was an out, and you did this. Everybody was kind of doing it and that's why this is why they brought in the FRC, which became the FCC, Federal Radio Commission, is because it was kind of like everybody was doing their own thing. Yeah, sure, I'll broadcast on this frequency, or then they maybe change, and KEX was splattering all over the AM dial, and everybody was going, why are they doing this? Why is this happening? Well, their crystal control was all off, and it was just a big problem. So they knocked them down to 2,500 watts for a couple of years, just because of that. KXL almost lost their license entirely. Oh, yes?
Some of the problems in the beginning with the FCC, wasn't that spurned by the Crosley Corporation going to 100,000 watts, and then there was the big lawsuit? I mean, then the organization was established.
Yeah,
They said that they
500,000
couldn't do
watts.
Crosby was at 500,000.
Yeah, they went to 500,000.
Yeah, there were higher power.
Yeah, but there was no control when they started doing that, and
Right.
so there was some sort of a court fight there, and then that established the
FCC.
Sonny, do you remember that? You read the book too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that.
I mean, I can't remember the exact situation, but there wasn't any FCC when the Crosley brothers started.
Okay.
What is, they were creating all kinds of problems, they were lighting up light bulbs.
Yeah.
Well, to finish up KXL, they were taken off the air. The FRC took them off the air, and they were off for about a week or two until they were inspected again. And the owner had to sign an affidavit that he would never do it again. And this really caused a real, and they finally issued them a license, but they were it was actually the owner's idea to split up time with KFIF, which became KBPS. And so from 1930 to 1941, KXL broadcast on the same frequency as KBPS, and they shared that frequency, and a lot of stations would do that in the 30s. And finally, with the new owners, because the FRC didn't, and then later FCC, didn't want to deal with the original owner because he had done all this, but the new owners, they were the people that got KXL on 750, which was originally going to be on 730, but then when we had that big shift in 1941, when all the frequencies changed to what we know today as the radio stations, KEX was on 1180, and then they moved to 1160, then to 1190. They were originally on 1180, and then KPO or KALE was on 1300 to 1330, and KGW was like one of the only ones that stayed on frequency. Yeah. Yeah, but they were a little bit earlier. They were on 610 before. But, okay, I'm sorry, I just keep babbling on. Yes?
What was the reason for the shift in 41?
It was, okay, this was the North American Regional Broadcast Agreement. It went into effect. They called it the NARBA Treaty. This was a treaty with Canada, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, all the North American countries, because there was a real problem with Mexican stations. Yeah. Which actually continued a little bit, but this put a little bit more order, and with that. A lot of the stations, like I mentioned, KOYN 940 went to 970, and KWJJ 1040 to 1080, and then of course, the others I mentioned. KXL and KBPS, they were on 1420, and they went to 1450. But KXL was only on there for a few months, and then went to 750 in that year. Yes.
Do you have any info on XELO and XEMO that come in here like a house of fire at night?
Or XERB.
Oh, yeah, XERB, right. I used to listen to Wolfman.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was amazing, wasn't it? Because here we are so close to Seattle, and they would be just banging on King. And they always said they were 50,000 watts, but I really, I don't know. I don't know. To finish that other question about the XL chain, that was all started by the people that owned KXL, and it was all based on the KXL call letters, and all their stations changed to an XL, XLF, XL, the whole, in 1947, on one date, all of them changed. And they sold these radio stations, advertising, as a group. And they had offices in Portland, in Los Angeles, and New York represented, and then they sold that way. And that went for a lot of years. In fact, a lot of the call letters still exist today. KXLY, there's one in Spokane. I think on TV, at least. Okay, yes?
Just to switch gears, can you talk about KKN?
Yes. Which one?
I don't know. I just remember as a kid, it was...
Okay, so you mean the original KVAN?
1480, yeah.
No. Okay, there were 3 KVANs in Portland. The first one was on 910, which became KISN. The second one was on 1480, and it began as those call letters in 1960, and the reason they got them in that year because there was like about a year span where there was no KVAN in Portland, but it was tied up with the FCC because the original owner of KVAN had a TV license, KVAN TV, and so when that was finally dismissed, then the owner, Catherine Murphy, got those call letters, and through the 60s and 70s, KVAN was on 1480. Then KGAR 1550 got the KVAN call letters in the 70s, I believe, late 70s. Yes?
I thought I remembered the KVAN lost their license because of a problem with the presidential election. They refused to have any ads for Democratic people during the election. And the FCC canceled the license.
Okay, you're right, wrong call letters. It was KISN 910.
Okay, KISN.
Right, which was KVAN originally. Went on the air as KVAN on 880, by the way. In 39. But yes, it's absolutely true. It was the first group of licenses ever in the FCC annals of history that the entire chain lost their licenses. Coil in Omaha and Wife, WIFE, all three stations.
That was in Burton ownership?
Right, right. Don Burton, right. Okay. Any other?
Very good. I was just
Yes.
on KVN, their programming was so entirely different.
You're talking about the progressive rock programming? Yes. Yes, it was.
Didn't it get in trouble too?
Yes, they did. Yes, Catherine Murphy. She was something else. What happened was they moved their transmitter to another location without notifying the FCC. They just did it. You know, okay. So finally, the FCC finds out about this, you know, and they moved out on Portland Boulevard. They were originally on Hayden Island, and originally the station began as KRIV in 1955 in Camas, and it slowly moved to Portland. In fact, at one time, between the KRIV, which meant river, and KVAN, it was KPVA, which meant Portland, Vancouver area. And they went for a few years with those callers because they wanted to be part of the Portland. All the stations on the outlying areas wanted to be part of Portland. Why? Because that's where the money is. Okay, yes.
I remember in the late 40s listening to Dusty.
Yes.
Playing from Vancouver.
Dusty died. Well, did he die or was he born today? Old Dusty either was born today, I can't remember. I have a daily, this day in Portland radio history.
Single-sided records
Yes.
on there all the time.
Yes. Old Dusty, he was on KVAN, and then he went to KWJJ, and he was on KKY for a while, and he was on a bunch of radio stations. And I have a kind of a blog that I do daily on PDX Radio, which is called This Day in Portland Radio History. And every day I present, because I collect dates. I love getting exact dates for things. And I'm also getting a lot of birthdays and death dates. And Old Dusty either was born today or he died today. I can't remember. But go to the website and you'll look at it. You can see it today. Yes.
Dick Novak?
Dick Novak, yes.
Is he still alive? Or?
No. I never met the guy, but wow, what a guy! I mean, he was the first one essentially to start playing R&B music, which became rock and roll in Portland, and he started it at KGON 1230, and that was the original Oregon City station. And then when KGON AM moved to 1520 in 1956, then that frequency was left open and Gresham got it. And that became KGRO, which became KRDR. Yes?
I just wondered if you might have known my son, Mike Phillips. I'm his father.
You're kidding!
Right.
Mike Phillips? Oh my gosh, no, but
I'm talking about the old Mike Phillips.
Yeah.
He passed away about 3 years ago.
Yes, Mike Phillips. Yes, KISN good guy, Mike Phillips, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh my goodness! Wow. Yeah, I've got an air check of his when he was rocking and rolling on KISN. Yeah. Well, great. Yes.
Yeah, is Pat, he's still alive up in North Portland?
Yes, he is, as far as I know. Yep. In fact, I would know if he died. Yeah. He doesn't get out that much. He's kind of slowed down in his years, but yeah, he was part of that special broadcast we did back in '98.
So he's still alive.
Yeah. Yes.
KQIV was the first quad station.
Well,
Was that call sign, did that come into existence for that station?
yes, yes, yes. I kind of specialize on what call letters stand for, and so yeah, if you have any questions about any particular call letters, yeah. And then of course that was kind of a misnomer. There was really no quad, but yes, that was the IV was the 4-channel, right? Roman numerals.
Who were the original DJs from that station? I don't remember them.
You know, there is a website that specializes. It's called Rockin' and Quad. If anybody wants to, and it's a great website. I know the guy that runs it, and it's just devoted entirely to KQIV, and it's a really a great a website. By the way, if anybody, and I'm going to throw this out because I'm going to forget to do this, if anybody has a question that they think of after this meeting, and if you want to ask me, my email is radiohistorian@msn.com. And I'm glad to answer questions. That's all I do is answer questions, or try at least. Yes, okay? Yes?
I can't remember if it was the 80s or 90s that you heard, I don't know if this was a gimmick or not, but AM stereo?
Right, no gimmick. First AM stereo station was KGW. I don't have a date on it, and they didn't really document it, but it happened in 1983. It went stereo. In fact, there were a lot of radio stations that went stereo. And I remember it was really kind of cool, I thought. I was up in Seattle, and I was able to get stereo, you know, from Portland on my mom and dad's Cadillac. They had a stereo radio in the Cadillacs, and AM stereo. Which,
so it actually worked for the guys in the club. So any AM radio that we have would have been stereo if you had 2 speakers.
Yeah, and it sounded pretty good, even long distance as it kind of came in and out. Yeah.
Maybe Sonny can help me remember on this, but on the mechanical TV stuff, where they broadcast both the audio on one channel and the television signal on a different radio, was anything of that type done in Portland?
Yes. Yes, I haven't done any really documentation because it goes into television. I do know a lot about television also as well, because it kind of goes along with everything, but I specialize in radio. But yes, there were broadcasts. In fact, I think it was Disneyland program, Walt Disney did a stereo broadcast that was also done on KGW radio. They were doing a lot of that. Are you interested in stereo stuff? Because I've got some stereo dates here on FM. Here we go. This is the good one. The first AM/FM combo in Oregon, meaning AM and FM, to broadcast in stereophonic sound was KPAM and KPFM. Each station broadcast one channel. Listeners were told that both stations, to listen to both stations simultaneously, and it was called at the time third dimensional sound. They didn't, stereo hadn't been invented, that word yet. And that happened on February 8, 1953, and they did their first broadcast at 12:30 p.m. Yes. Okay. So, yeah. I thought I heard somebody. Okay. No? Okay. Oh, yes.
Simul receive this to get the stereo. Third dimension.
Wow.
Oh, right. Thank you. In fact, where did I put it here? Here it is. I've got a single sheet. Mark wanted me to go through because we've got microphones from KGW and KEX, and there was a 10-year span of time when both radio stations were owned by one company. And it's kind of funny because they are today too now, once again, under Clear Channel. But at the time, KGW, which went on the air March 25th, 1922, as the first commercial station, not the very first station, but and it was put on the air by the Oregonian Publishing Company. And they had their studios in the Oregonian building. But with the Depression happening, there was a real problem with radio stations, going through this process. And so this one company, it was KEX was owned originally by the Western Broadcasting Company, and they also owned KJR and KGA, KJR Seattle and KGA Spokane, and they had their own network, and they were literally going to be the next network on radio. And it was called the American Broadcasting Company, believe it or not, in the 1920s. And just before the Depression hit, they ran out of money as they almost had their lines to the east. They were going to affiliate in Washington D.C. They had station lined up, and they were carrying CBS programming because CBS was a little company and didn't have enough money to go across the nation like NBC, and so. They put their program. There were shared nights. Some nights were CBS nights. Some were ABC nights. And this went on for about a year until they went bankrupt. And then they put together the Northwest Broadcasting Company, which was the 3 stations only doing stuff that they did to them, with themselves within the group of stations, all owned by one company. And then from there. They finally sold to the National Broadcasting Company, and NBC owned KEX for a couple of years, and then they were sold to within an LMA to the Oregonian Publishing Company, and that happened on August 25th, 1933. And KGW at the time was 1,000 watts, and KEX was 5,000 watts. By then they'd gone back to their original full power at that time. KGW was affiliated with the NBC Orange Network. Now this was a Pacific network. In fact, it was called the Pacific Coast Network. Because it was the first network, and they could call themselves whatever they wanted, and that only covered the West Coast, and all the NBC stations mainly broadcast from San Francisco, KPO and KGO, and they recreated NBC programming from the East in San Francisco because there were no network lines. And so there were separate casts, and they did that, and that's how the KEX was before that. They originally were with the NBC, what they called Gold Network, and so KEX was with the Gold Network, KGW with the Orange Network. Then let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm finishing up the network stuff. NBC's Gold Network became part of NBC Blue Network on March 12, 1936. Now, even though it was the Gold Network, it basically carried the Blue Network programs, and the Orange Network towards the end carried Red Network programs. And then finally, well, why do we have an Orange Network? Because the lines were already connected to the East, and so there was no need to have a difference between the networks. So KGW became part of the Red Network, and then KEX was part of the Blue, and then that went on for a few years. KEX moved its transmitter from 122nd and Gleason to the KGW transmitter site on Columbia Slough Road, that would be Delta Park, on July 29, 1934, erecting a 300-foot wooden mast. KGW had been there since August 3rd, 1931. They were originally broadcast from the Oregonian building on top with a flat top design, if you're familiar with that. KEX studios were moved from 201 Terminal Sales Building to the Oregonian building with KGW on August 30th, 1934. The new enlarged 7th floor studios at 537 Southwest 6th Avenue included all new Western Electric equipment. KGW increased daytime power to 5,000 watts in February 1935. KEX, I covered that. And KEX switched frequency from 1180 to 1160 on November 29th, 1939. Then on March 29th, 1941, KEX switched to 1190, and that's when all the other stations switched as well. KGW added an additional 625-foot tower and increased night power to, from 1,000 watts to 5,000 watts directional on Christmas Day, 1941. Let's see. KEX NBC Blue Network name was shortened to the Blue Network on January 10th, 1942. This was the starting of the division of NBC Blue and NBC Red, which became, of course, ABC, the Blue. And then KGW, called the Red Network, shortened just to NBC on September 1st, 1942. And there's the full division, but still owned by one company. But then they were sold in '43. Then on September 23rd, 1943, a 3-alarm fire in the Oregonian building swept through the KGW KEX studios around midnight, destroying $75,000 to $90,000 worth of equipment and 20 years of KGW memorabilia. What a sickening day that must have been. I mean, they had all that stuff there, and it was all just burned to a crisp. KGW and KEX were able to broadcast from their transmitter site, and of course back then, all stations, if they had remote transmitters, were all fully capable of broadcasting, so there was no problem. They just ran to the transmitter site. I remember reading in one of the things, they just grabbed one of the microphones, and it was one of the last things they did as they were, being swept out of the building to get out, and they just ran to the transmitter site. The following day, KGW and KEX began broadcasting from the KWJJ building at 1011 Southwest 6th Avenue, and that was on September 24th, 1943. And then the final thing I've got is, as a result of the FCC's new duploy policy ruling, the Oregonian sold KEX to Westinghouse for $400,000 on December 28, 1944. Now, I wish I had more information, and if you have any questions in that 10-year period, maybe I can answer them. Yes?
KELE was
yes.
on top of the Weatherly building.
Absolutely, it was.
And the tower is now next to Benson High School, I think. The same tower is being used by KPTS.
Yeah, okay, well, that could be. I'm not going to say it's not. KALE was on the Weatherly building. It then moved to its sister station. The first combo, meaning stations that were owned together, wasn't KGW and KEX. It was KOIN and KALE, which was originally KTBR. Now, a lot of people think it was KFJR, but that's incorrect. And the reason why that's out there, and you've maybe heard that KFJR was the station before KLE, was because the Journal, which owned both of them, they had a relationship with KFJR. They didn't own them at the time, but ran their Journal Juniors program and a lot of their stuff on the station. And this was one of these shared time stations, and KTBR was the other station it shared time with. And KTBR was the station that became KALE, because KFJR sold out to KALE. And so they had already owned and changed the call letters to KLE. So that's how it kind of went. And so the reason why they went with KLE is because KOIN was coin and KLE was kale, and kale is slang for money. And that's why you've got that call letter. And those call letters still exist today in the Tri-Cities. Yes?
I didn't notice here KFJR was actually an original station in County, Nebraska.
Right, right. Right.
About 35 years ago, they finally took the antenna down for the old radio station in Hillsboro, Oregon.
Yes.
It was out on River Road.
Yes.
And a lot of people may not realize it was KFFO, but it was owned by Dr. E.H. Smith, which is now Tuwality Hospital.
Yes, that's the man that had
He
the
transmitted 5 watts.
right 5 watts. Yes, and he went on the air the day that KBPS says they went on the air. But if you go to the Oregonian, you'll see that he went on the air on that date, and he originally started on that 360 meters, which all Portland did, and he had to share, and he was on like a couple of days a week. And the thing is, though, that transmitter you're talking about, that probably wasn't his transmitter. What that was.
That River Road, I believe.
And well, wait a minute. You said Hillsborough? In Hillsborough? Because
There was a River Road going out of Hillsborough.
Because there was a station in Forest Grove that was on the air, but
The one in Forest Grove is almost downtown.
okay.
We used to have the transmitter, actually, one of the guys that ran the transmitter years ago lived in Banks.
Okay.
He had a whole wall as big as the end of this, full of shortwave radios.
Okay. Now I'd never heard that before, and I was getting that confused with Forest Grove, because the Forest Grove one tower was up for many years. I don't know if everybody saw that. It was off one of the roads, but
Yeah.
Okay.
The
All
one
right.
for Hillsborough was made out of wood.
It was. Oh, okay. Yeah, they also had the largest telegraph station. What was it? Oh boy, but I can't recall the callers. But they went on the air in 1921, and they broadcast. Well, they had their offices in Portland, but the transmitter was actually out in Hillsborough. But it was the largest tower in, I think, the world at one time.
Was that the one out at Chute Park?
There is a picture of it and a lot of information that I've also added to it. It's on Wikipedia. Have you seen that?
But Lyles Garcia and I have been talking about research. And
I think only the Eiffel Tower was taller. I mean, it was a huge tower.
Was it Federal Radio?
Right, Federal Radio Company. Right. And speaking of, I wasn't, I thought I thought maybe I'd give you some really early stuff, as long as we're talking about telegraph. I don't know if anybody's interested in telegraph, because that's pretty far back. But the first Oregon demonstration of wireless telegraph took place at the Multnomah County Library on December 28, 1907. The first Portland wireless telegraph station began operation from Council Crest on April 5th, 1908. The call sign was PE, and the station was owned by the United Wireless Telegraph Company. The first station in Oregon was TA, and it started at Cape Blanco by August 1907 and was owned by the United States Naval Radio Service. Yeah. Okay.
Craig, I just want to thank you very much for coming and sharing with us.
Yeah.
When you and I met just now, this is the first time face to face, but your name and voice were very familiar to me, and it took me a while at my advanced age to get it all put back together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I want to talk to you more about this telegraph station, too.
Yes, yes.
Thanks again. It was really a good presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and I'm going to stick around and I'll answer any other questions you might have. And okay.
Thanks again.
Okay. All right. Yeah.